yourself, state your party affiliation, the office you're running for. We know all of those, but we film this and we'll put the film up the same day the endorsements come out, which is next Wednesday. So we'll ask you to start by giving a brief bio. We'll move into some questions about issues, and we encourage you, if an opponent says something you disagree with, feel free to respond or chime in or say something. Please be civil. Don't talk over your opponent. And we'll get started in just a minute.
Hi, Mark Sussman. Mark Woolridge. Hi, Greg.
Jeff Smith.
Jeff.
Mark, nice to see you.
Yep.
Hi, Mark. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Bruce Cup.
Yeah.
Is he in your?
Go ahead and have a seat.
Were you sitting here?
Yeah.
Now, if you can catch us, I get a product endorsement.
Yeah.
That's right.
I sure missed our Columbia branded gloves.
Yeah.
I noticed there's a lot of
Paint fell
there's a
off.
lot of places to imbibe around here.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know if
You
that
mean
says
inside the office?
Yeah, well, yeah, I haven't gotten that far, but distillery, wine shop, bars.
Yeah, there's a lot of drinking to be done in this neighborhood. We ready, Brian? Okay, great. Well, let's start at this end of the table. Bruce, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about where you grew
And
up.
can I ask if any of you have any campaign literature that
Sure.
you want to hand out? Now's a great time to do it.
How much you want for each of you?
One for each of us.
Thank you.
How many do you need?
We'll send you stuff by
Yeah.
email.
Okay. All right. Okay, go ahead, Bruce.
Thanks.
I'm Bruce Cuff. I was raised in the Brooks area, farming community north of Salem. Grew up there, graduated from Jervis High School. My dad was a barber there in the area for 43 years. And went to Oregon State University for a couple years, paying my way through school. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Army, joined the Army, also a veteran of the Oregon National Guard. Have a degree from Willamette in political science, and spent 15 years working for a tire company, Superior Tire Service, as their purchaser and commercial sales manager. And the last 17 years I've been a real estate agent out of the Salem and Staten areas, and my wife and I live in Mahama, Oregon, which is a logging community about 25 miles east of Salem. We have 4 kids and 3 granddaughters. Our 3 oldest are married, and my youngest son Gideon is in the U.S. Army, and he's currently at Fort Hood, attached to the 1st Cav Unit. He's military intelligence. And he just got back from spending a year in Kuwait.
So you ran for governor last time?
Yes.
You ran for attorney general?
No, I ran for governor in 2014 against Richardson, and then because of the 2-year thing, I was in the race against Bud Pierce.
Okay. And what about your other civic engagement? You involved with the party in the precinct?
Yeah, I'm a precinct committee person for Marion County. I spent 5 years on the Marion County Board of Property Tax Appeals. I'm a member of Senium Chapel. I'm deacon there, adult Sunday school teacher. I'm the treasurer for the church. We've been going there for at least 10 years or more, off and on.
Sure. And your realty work, is that residential? Commercial?
Residential, yeah, mainly.
How's that going right now?
Good. I mean, I've been campaigning since September, so I've just been doing listings, and in fact, I just dealt with a sale last night that I was working on. So,
okay, great. Representative?
Yeah, I'm Representative Newt Bueller, a Republican representing most of the city of Bend in the Oregon legislature right now. I was born in Roseburg, raised there by 2 parents who never even graduated from high school, so they stressed to my brothers and I that if you work hard, play by the rules, and get a good education, really the sky is the limit. I took them seriously on that. I went to Oregon State, then got a master's degree in politics and economics, and then off to medical school.
How come your parents didn't graduate from high school?
A generational thing. My mom was from Oklahoma, had recently moved to Oregon, met my dad. My dad was more interested in going into the Navy than finishing high school. So met my wife in Baltimore at medical school. Always knew I wanted to get back to Oregon, especially after living 5 years in some pretty rough neighborhoods in East Baltimore. returned here after our training was done and moved to Bend, where we both set up medical practices, started businesses, raised 2 kids, and also 2 very spoiled dogs. Started our businesses there, grew our medical clinic from about 30 employees to over 200. And then 4 years ago, became concerned about the direction of the state and ran for political office for the legislature in 2014. I've also been involved civically in Bend, served on the board of directors of the Ford Family Foundation, the High Desert Museum, and also the Oregon State University Foundation.
So, you are what kind of a physician?
Orthopedic surgeon,
Right, and your wife?
hip and knee replacement.
And your wife is?
Eye surgeon, ophthalmologist.
Okay, and then talk a bit about your business, the clinic.
Yeah. So the clinic is a multi-specialty clinic made up of orthopedic surgery, neurosurgery, occupational medicine, and physical medicine, integrated in entirety, around the kind of musculoskeletal care.
And it is ongoing, it's in one building in Bend?
Well, we have one main building, but we have satellite offices all around Central Oregon. I think 4 or 5 different locations around the area. So.
And I'm just, don't get too into the weeds, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how Obamacare has affected your business.
Well, it's complex. In one way, certainly it's been helpful with the expansion of Medicaid specifically. So there used to be a fair number of people in Oregon who didn't have access to health insurance. Now it's only 5% of people. So that's helped. In other ways, a lot of people's deductibles are higher, so that's been tough in terms of people managing that in the individual market specifically. So.
And what procedures do you conduct at your clinic? You're doing some surgery?
Yeah, so we try to make the concept that we created was a one-stop shop. So if you have, say, a hip complaint, you could go there and take care of everything you wanted, physical therapy, being evaluated.
Could I get my hip replaced there or no?
You can now on a limited basis. So the technology has moved to the point where we have an outpatient surgery center, and some people are getting their hip and knee replaced on an outpatient basis, mainly because the technology has improved, specifically pain control.
You in the market?
No, I'm just curious.
It's actually a very interesting industry in terms of hip and knee replacement, in terms of how it's evolved very quickly. When I started practice, people were in the hospital 4 or 5 days, and now we're doing it to outpatient. So.
Okay, thanks.
Jeff?
My name's Jeff Smith. I'm running for governor. I'm a Republican. I grew up in Elgin, Oregon on a cattle ranch. Went to Oregon Institute of Technology, graduated there, moved to Los Angeles. From there, I worked all across the United States. I've worked on 3 different continents, 4 different countries. Came back to Oregon, built an aerospace manufacturing facility. Started with a bare field, built a building, bought machines, installed machines, started making parts. And along the way, I was a very careful observer of Oregon politics.
Tell us a little bit more about, before we jump to politics, where was the building, or where, do you still run that business?
It's no longer in business.
Okay.
And for the last 3 years, I've been working here in Portland for Boeing. My main skill set's computer programmer. And
So, I'm sorry, you said you've worked all across the U.S. and down in L.A. What kind of work were you doing?
all of that was in aerospace. Virtually all of the positions that I've had are in aerospace.
So
for the major OEMs, Boeing, Northrop, General Dynamics.
Specifically, what are you doing?
I'm in the manufacturing realm. So they have machines that they start out with.
So was your business a machine tooling business for the
Machine shop. 5-axis machine shop.
Okay, so you had these unbelievably expensive metal,
very large
tooling,
machines,
and you would do the programming, which can sometimes take days for these very specific months.
Yeah,
Okay.
and what you're doing is you're starting with a chunk of material, usually some sort of metal, and you cut away everything that doesn't look like the part.
Right.
Yeah.
You weren't doing any 3D printing though; it was all machine tooling.
I was not in any 3D printing.
Okay. And you were doing
we did some of that, but we outsourced.
And you were doing mostly aerospace work.
Virtually all. 737, Boeing commercial work,
Right.
DOD spares parts, F-18 parts like he used to fly,
Right.
C-17 parts. If it flew, there's a good chance we would work
What was
on
the
it.
name of your machine shop?
Omnicut Inc.
Omnicut
Inc.
Inc. And what happened to it?
Downturn 2008. 70% of my customers pulled their work, and the other 30% stopped paying me.
Bad combination.
Before this thing crashed, how big was the operation? How many people did you have?
15 people.
So, I mean, I know a little bit about your business, but these lathes, I guess, that you use.
Milling machines.
Yeah, are really expensive.
Yes.
So what happened to that equipment?
Well, that was the problem. You know, I had a very large business loan, and so when my customers left and stopped paying me, then that's what
So the machines got repossessed?
the bank got everything.
So you started to talk about your segue to politics. Tell us about that.
So Greg was a delegate to the 2008 GOP National Convention. I was an alternate delegate. Saw John McCain get dismantled in Oregon, and ever since then I've just been studying Oregon politics. And my whole campaign is geared around a strategy. It's called the Thinking Man Strategy of how a Republican can get elected in a blue state like Oregon.
So Jeff, is this your first bid for public office?
Yes.
And just why governor as opposed to some other race?
I feel like my skill set is best used in like the governor's office, an executive position.
So a question we often ask when we see someone we haven't seen before whose first bid for public office is a statewide office is, why wouldn't you start out small where the chances of you getting elected are probably a little bit higher?
You know, there for like about a week I was off my meds and I just made a bad decision and decided to run for governor.
Okay. You want to provide a more serious answer to that question? Or?
No, I'm good with that.
Okay. Thanks.
Greg?
Good morning. Thank you for having me here. Bruce, good to see you. Brother, good to see you. Doctor, I've got a knee replacement from Catherine Schavel at OHSU. Miracle.
Good.
Thank you for what you do. Thanks for fixing my airplanes. Came from the Midwest, small college work-study program, fired boilers to get the campus heated every day. And then
Is that Blackburn College?
Blackburn.
Is that in Iowa?
it's in Illinois,
Oh.
Carlinville, Illinois.
Okay.
600 students, graduating class of 99. Got through school and then joined the Navy because I wanted to do the toughest flying in the world, and that's off aircraft carriers. Had 27 years in the Navy, got some wonderful experiences there. Got to fly with the Blue Angels, lead them three times actually, a 2-year tour, another 1-year tour, another most of 1-year tour. They said you have to do it 3 times to get it right, so I did. Get called back, and then I got to command a base that was like a small state, remote area of Central California, San Joaquin Valley. Had lots of ag, had everything the state would have: airports, schools, hospitals, public
What
safety,
was that called?
housing. Sorry.
What was that called?
NAS, Naval Air Station Lemoore, Lemoore.
And where is it in California?
It's in Central California, about 40 miles southwest of Fresno, out in the middle of the cotton.
How many people were on the base?
During the workday, probably about 16,000. Big runways. Quality of life was the issue we shot for there. For working, living, learning, all the qualities that you would want in your life. And the station was named the best in the Navy that year, worldwide, presidential citation. That was a lot of fun. And so the Navy career, 27 years, picked up a lot of leadership techniques that I put into my own stuff. And then I went to work for FedEx, changed the safety culture there by bringing in something called the debrief into the checklist to try to improve the culture there. I did that for about 13 years.
Where were you?
Debrief meaning after a flight you say what
Yes.
went wrong or what almost
Exactly.
went wrong?
And we did that in the Blue Angels. And that's how we got this Kaizen, this constant improvement, right? And we didn't do that in FedEx. In fact, in the whole industry, it wasn't done. And all it took was getting done with the flight. Instead of just fleeing to get to the crew bus and get to sleep because it was the overnight express, we'd stop for 30 seconds, a minute and a half, and we'd gather the things that had gone wrong, the things that had gone right. And it really changed the culture.
So where were you when you were with FedEx? Where were you located?
I was based in Memphis, but you can live anywhere because you can commute in. So I lived in Pensacola, and then I moved here 12 years ago, and I could commute. I usually went to Oakland because we have a big facility.
You moved to
there.
Oregon 12 years ago.
12 years ago.
And why?
Because it was beautiful. I remember it, flying in the roads.
Okay, so there's no other reason than just sort of lifestyle? You didn't have family here?
I had a sister who lives here. In fact, her husband runs.
Where specifically did you move?
Where I
in Oregon?
bought a condo when the Elliott Tower was just being built. I bought a brand new one because I saw some economic advantages to that, perhaps. Always thinking of that, but I wanted to live downtown. I wanted to experience downtown life, and then moved away out all the way 2 miles out into Southwest.
So you're a resident of Portland?
Unincorporated, yes.
Whereabouts?
Canyon Drive.
Yeah.
As Sarah Palin would say, I can see the Beaverton sign from my back porch.
So this is a relatively late in life, no offense, decision for you. You haven't run for office before.
Never have.
So what motivated you to get into this race?
I was asked, I was drafted
By?
by a former state representative and a former state senator.
Can you tell us who?
Sure, Derek Kitts and Bruce Starr. They said, we like your background.
So that's all it takes? Somebody asks you to do something, you say sure?
No, because they asked me in June and I didn't get in until February. So I had a lot of thinking on it, did a lot of squared away in my life, and decided this is a challenge that I can't turn away from. They've drafted me to do this, and I have
What was the argument that they made that you found compelling?
that I can win.
Well, but they are obviously aware that Dr. Bueller was going to be running.
I don't know if we were at the time. I mean,
I think everybody else in the state was.
yeah, I'm sure they were. I'm conservative, and a little bit, there's some differentiators between the doctor and I. So, we just decided.
Is there any other civic service that you want to share with us?
I've been on boards, the Dorchester board. I've been on the Oregon International Air Show board. Is natural fit there, obviously.
Right.
This and that, lots of fun things in the community. And I love the Make-A-Wish. I haven't been on the Make-A-Wish board, but I really admire them, and I've been to their functions and things like that.
Okay.
So Representative Bueller, last time we saw you in here, you were running for Secretary of State, I believe.
Right?
And then you decided to go back and start at the beginning in the House. So what have you learned? What have you learned in your 2 sessions in the House?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, I learned important lessons from running for Secretary of State, certainly. That was overall a really good experience. The biggest take home from that is I really don't like to lose, and I don't intend to do it again. And the nice thing about running in Bend for the last 2 legislative races, we've had successful campaigns. And that's taught me how to run and win in a tough environment. I hold the most Democratic seat in the legislature that's held by a Republican right now. So that's been good preparation for another bid at a statewide race. In the legislature itself, it's taught me a lot about Oregon politics and policy. It's almost like getting a PhD in Oregon politics and policy those 4 years. Having the front row seat to the mismanagement of the state has been particularly eye-opening.
So let's go into that a little bit. I mean, what part of the mismanagement of the state do you think that you could most effectively tackle?
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple levels of mismanagement, but probably the biggest and most concerning is the condition of our public schools. It is time to rescue kids and teachers in our public schools from an unacceptable status quo. I'd make the argument that it's the single biggest failure of Governor Brown is her indifference to really fixing the condition of our public schools.
So what's the recipe for fixing it?
That's a multi-stage problem. First thing is we have to get more dollars actually into the classroom. And that really entails meaningful PERS reform, but it's more than just PERS reform. It's also a whole-scale approach to actually how we're educating kids. We need more investment in early learning. We need to make sure kids read by the 3rd grade. By 9th grade, we need to make sure they have an individual success plan. When they move into junior and senior year, we need more opportunity for career and vocational education and more dual credits. And then once they graduate, we need to make sure they have mentors that they can rely on to get internships and apprenticeships. And in those schools that are particularly struggling, I think the model of providing wraparound services and personal counseling that Tony Hobson's doing at the SCI, is a particularly good model. It's producing great results at Jefferson. They've really moved the dial in terms of increasing graduation rates almost 25% over a pretty short period of time. So those are just some of the things that.
So we've heard for 10 years the Democrats have controlled the building, many of those same ideas.
Yeah.
Those aren't new, no offense, those aren't new ideas. So
Yeah.
why would you be any more successful in implementing them than people who've been not implementing them for the past 10 years?
Yeah. A single word: leadership. Leadership from a governor. Leadership that is interested more in independent ideas and in innovation than playing to a far left ideology. And someone who's going to make it a top priority of making sure that happens and making a commitment to doing it.
What would you point to as the single best example of your leadership in the legislature? Something tangible?
Yeah. I think the birth control legislation that I was able to pass my first year in the legislature as a freshman started off with a very out-of-the-box idea that both the left and the right didn't like, an initial opposition from both sides. But as they learned about the idea that, hey, this can make a big impact on women's health, decrease unintended pregnancies by almost 20%, and also have a significant impact on decreasing poverty, because one of the biggest drivers of poverty is a single woman having an unintended birth. And be able to get that through with.
Why didn't you just make it like it's in Europe and have it so you don't have to show up to a doctor at all? You have to have a prescription within the last 12 months to continue that program. In Europe, you can just show up, buy it across the counter.
Yeah, because in Oregon, in the United States, unfortunately, that's controlled at the FDA level, so that's a federal level, so you can't change that at the state level. So this is the next best situation, is where you can have it by a pharmacist's prescription, essentially making it over the counter without going through the federal changes, which would be very, very difficult to get through. But just right, in countries that have done this, you see similar results to what we're seeing in Oregon: decreased numbers of unintended pregnancies and decreased numbers of abortions.
So why would some members of your own party in the legislature be recruiting another candidate to run against you?
Yeah, well, certainly, Mark, I'm not the most conservative candidate for governor, and there's some people who want a more conservative candidate running for governor. And I'm also not the dashing jet fighter pilot that Greg Wilbert is. So,
So are there any particular issues in which Greg is more conservative that you think is the reason why some members of the legislature recruited him?
Yeah, certainly. I think, I'm pro-choice. I'm pro-marriage equality. I think those are two, defining issues.
So would you agree?
Yes.
Bruce, so we know that Greg is the right-to-life candidate in this race.
Let me back up
Sure.
in the question you asked. Would I agree? You said
Marriage equality.
marriage equality.
And abortion.
The law is for marriage equality. Yes. I'm not against that. I am pro-life.
Okay.
Very definitely.
So that's a big difference between these two. Jeff, what's the difference between you and any of your opponents?
I've avoided all of those issues because my one issue is winning. Those are non-starters for Republicans to get elected in Oregon. And so I've crafted my whole campaign to avoid those issues because.
But how do you, if you're going door to door, I don't know if you are, but if you were to go to door and you knocked on my door and I said, where are you on the issue of choice, what would you say?
I
Would you say I'm
would-
avoiding that issue?
I would say exactly what I just said. That's a non-starter if you want to get elected. And if I'm talking to a Republican, they go, well, it's been 36 years. How long do you want to go without a voice? And that's a compelling argument.
So you're telling me you meet constituents, potential constituents, and you tell them, I don't have an opinion or I'm not going to share it on the issue of choice, and they accept that?
Not only that, I don't share it on things like PERS.
And they accept that? And they say
Not,
yes?
they may press me, but pressing me and getting an answer is two different things.
But
So,
you don't think voters want
so
to
your
know-
campaign strategy is to try to take as few positions as possible.
As few negative positions. I've got 4 issues that are key. Lowering the cost of healthcare, lowering the cost of healthcare insurance, medical insurance, fixing K through 12, and homelessness. And those things, there's a wide variety of Oregonians that are interested in doing something about those issues. Let's start there. Let's focus on that. Let's focus on things that we can have a wide group of people that really do need to have those things fixed. And not argue about those other things.
Bruce, how about the differences between you and your opponents that you would like to highlight?
Well, I'm pro-life, but I didn't get the endorsement. So, and that's, that's one of those political things. They picked Greg and they didn't endorse other people in this race that are pro-life. I just think that a lot of the focus that the current administration is doing to try to fix the PERS deficit as far as taxation goes is wrong. And I don't know that we disagree on that, but I just have I just don't believe we can fix education without dealing with PERS at all.
Okay.
And so.
Okay. Representative Bueller, I'd like to hear your thoughts on how you actually address the PERS unfunded liability, since most of it is attributable to the Tier 1 members.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you know, Nigel, this is an issue of vital concern for a lot of people. It should be an issue of vital concern for loyal public employees who've already retired, because I'm concerned if we don't do something in the next decade, they may be only getting pennies on the dollar of what they're expecting in terms of their retirement benefits. I think it's a vital concern to the 32 fourth graders I saw out in the Reynolds fourth grade class. That's a big concern. And also I think it's a vital concern to many loyal and hardworking Oregon taxpayers who are paying some of the highest state income tax rates in the nation and not getting the essential social services that they expect and need in many cases. Now, here's what I would do as governor. I will not sign a single new spending bill until I have a PERS reform bill on my desk. Now, I'm not going to shut down the government, but no new programs until I have a bill on my desk that's going to really move the dial and improve this situation. Here are some of the characteristics of that bill that I'd want to see. First is we cap annual payouts. No more big Bilotti payouts, the $50,000 a month payouts. Cap it somewhere $150,000 a year. The second thing we need to do is we actually need to require Oregon public employees to pay into their own retirement system. Oregon's been one of the few or only state in some cases where we haven't required our employees to pay into a retirement system. And third, we actually need to transition PERS to a 401k type of plan, away from a defined benefit to defined contribution. Those changes will return around $1.6 billion to the general fund and decrease the unfunded liability substantially over the next decade.
Well, I think that's a thoughtful and logical way to approach it, and I think there's absolutely no way he's going to beat Kate Brown running with that.
Well, I don't believe that trying to actually do PERS reform on current, the way I look at it as a realtor is we have a contract with our state employees. So I don't believe the answer is to actually change the people who are already on the system that have a guarantee. They have a contract with the state, because there's 70 out of the 240,000 people who are currently paying into PERS. 70,000 of them are eligible for employment or for retirement. So if you start changing the program, then these folks, before that program change, you're going to lose a lot of those people retiring so they can actually get the benefit before the change goes into effect. And then you're going to have to rehire all those positions. So, you're going to add to the 125,000 PERS recipients that we currently have, and you're just going to bloat the system. The idea for me is, our general fund, I use a figure about $20 billion. 90% of that general fund is, we get that money from personal income taxes that employees pay. 5% of that general fund is made up of the $1 billion business pays. So what this administration has been doing is trying to increase the tax on this 5%, driving jobs and businesses out of state. So we're losing the jobs, losing the businesses, and going backwards. We should be decreasing taxes on businesses in this state, trying to maximize the number of people working in the private sector. 1 in 6 jobs in Oregon right now is government. We need to get to 1 in 8, 1 in 10. We need an expansion of the private sector to be able to meet our obligations to our state employees.
Bruce, I got a couple questions.
Sure.
Based on your campaign literature, you talk about natural resource management, and you say your counties should manage the people of Oregon's land within their jurisdiction and receive any revenue generated.
Correct.
So I read that, and I interpret that meaning that any U.S. Forest Service or BLM land should be turned over to counties.
Eventually, over time, that would be the effect. But right now,
So, which is similar to, I realize you don't believe in violent protest, but it's similar to the Harney County standoff, right? Those people believe that federal land should be in control of the local counties.
well, currently, Congress has mandated the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM to coordinate with the county and the state government when it comes to their regional management plans for that land. And a lot of counties are getting on board and actually doing that. As governor from the state level, we would invoke coordination from the state level where
But are
we,
you advocating that those lands be federal lands be turned over?
the way that I look at those lands is they belong to the people of Oregon now, no matter who manages
But
them.
in your mind, should that land be turned over to counties?
Eventually, the county is going to do a way better job managing it than the current mismanagement that the.
Right, so I understand that. And then secondly, you talk about First and Second Amendment. You say, I'm a pro-life Christian conservative.
Yes.
So I understand what it means to be conservative. I understand what it means to be pro-life. But what does it mean to be a Christian?
A Christian,
Yeah.
follower of Jesus Christ. I try
But how
to.
does that inform your race for governor?
How does that inform my
I mean,
race?
I understand your position on choice
Right.
and that you're conservative.
Mhm.
But you know, what's the difference between a pro-life Jewish conservative and a pro-life Christian conservative? If I'm a voter looking at this and determining whether it's...
I think it just speaks to the person's integrity that you know they're going to follow the golden rule. You're going to love your neighbor as yourself.
But how would that differ if you said, I'm a pro-life Muslim conservative, or I'm a pro-life conservative who bowls? I'm just trying to figure out what does the Christian appellation have to do with how I should think about you as a candidate?
Well, I that's just who I am. I'm a Christian. I'm just telling people that I am a Christian.
Okay.
So that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ and that I try to live my life according to those tenets
Okay.
that He taught.
All right.
So.
Greg, I'd like to, Jeff, to come back to you just 1 second. I'd like to hear your thoughts on PERS. Do you have specific ideas about what you would do about the $25 billion unfunded liability?
We'd have to chip away at it. I'm a military retiree, so I get a check. I wouldn't want that check to be taken advantage of or changed in any way. I wouldn't
Yeah,
do
let me
that.
just be clear. I mean, all my proposals are going forward. I think the moral decision's been very, very clear. You can't go back and claw back people's benefits that have already retired. So.
Okay. Go ahead, Greg.
And that's what I'm saying. I wouldn't go back, and we made a promise.
Okay.
Especially back when I started, when it was actually civil service, when the wages were really low.
So no
we made a promise.
no clawback. So how do you chip away? What specific mechanisms do you use to reduce the $25 billion?
My good friend Alan Alley has been studying this over the years. He and I have talked for hours and hours about it. And the thing that we will do, and I will get Alan to help craft this way forward. And just as you gentlemen had said, starting tomorrow, starting the day I get hired, I'll be the first one that goes on a defined contribution vice a defined benefit. And in the long term, and we'll make it good enough. I mean, I get arguments that, nobody can, get a 401k after 25 years and retire off of that. Well, you can. We'll make it good enough if people manage it correctly, and we'll help them manage it. But once they retire, there's no longer an obligation from the state. And we can chip away at this $22 billion unfunded liability and not let it continue to grow, and then watch the actuarial tables as people bluntly die, and the tier 1 folks start going away. That's going to start dropping off. The new people coming in, when they retire, we don't owe them anything.
Greg, is Alan Alley endorsing your candidacy?
He's held off, I think, because he's a good friend of Newt's and a good friend of
So
mine.
he has not made an endorsement at all?
Has he? Newt?
I don't think so. No, he's told me the same thing. He's
Yeah.
friends of both of
Yeah,
us.
we both. Come on, Alan. Come on, Alan.
Jeff, you wanted to say something? before we-
Yeah, for me, I don't broadcast it, but I too am a Christian. For me, for every one of those things, my Christian faith allows me to build common ground with them. It gives me the freedom, if we have something that we both agree on, then I don't care if they're Jewish or Muslim or anything else. I don't care what their social perspective is. I have the freedom to just develop common ground on anything that we have common ground on. So if it's cutting something or spending more on something, my Christian faith allows me freedom.
Great. Greg, what letter grade would you assign to President Donald Trump so far in terms of his performance
B.
in office? Why?
B, because he's done good things. He's gotten a lot of good stuff done. But he hasn't shown the style points that I would use. And I think the way he works with his team is different than what I would do, because I've had high trust teams before, where you have to have high trust.
Just out of curiosity, do you believe his campaign colluded with the Russians?
No.
Do you believe he has?
I don't see show me the evidence. And
I'm just asking. I'm not going to argue with it. I just
No,
want to
no.
know what you think. Do you
Yeah.
believe he had an affair with Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal?
I don't know. I don't know.
What was your...
If you did believe that, would it change your view of his performance? Or does it not matter as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, let's talk about performance, right? Not his character, not his judging his character, judging his performance. And that's where
So
the
do you
team
think
comes
we
in.
judge character too much with elected officials? We should
No.
focus less on that?
No, I don't. I think character is a big part. You want to hear my 4 C's of trust?
Sure.
Competence, character, commitment, and the most important is consistency.
Well, Donald Trump has like one of those.
Which one?
The third one, commitment.
Commitment, yeah.
He arguably has commitment. The
Yeah,
other
and that's
three,
why I think he has staff problems, because he hasn't built the trust.
What was your reaction to his recent foray or bombing of Syria?
I have always, in 27 years, of course, been a follower of the commander-in-chief, what he decided to do. Now, you get into arguments about whether that should have gone to Congress first, or whether he had the authority to do it. And I think in this case he did, and he needed to do that. We need to stop people from using chemical weapons.
Okay.
So that internationally is agreed upon.
You're no longer an active member of the military service.
Right.
Does that mean that he's still right no matter what he does because he's
No,
commander-in-chief?
not at all, no. But you follow the lawful orders of the commander-in-chief, and that, in that case, that would have been a lawful order. If he'd have said, go bomb downtown London, I said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Okay. Greg, you would give President Trump and why?
You mean Jeff Smith?
Okay.
Yeah, no, I know you're not President Trump.
No, Jeff.
My name is Jeff Smith.
I said Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah. You thought I
Okay.
called you Greg?
Yeah.
No, I just
Sorry.
I mumble. No, I know you're Jeff.
My campaign is not closely aligned with Donald Trump.
Okay.
I'm not answering any questions about Donald Trump in any way, shape, or form. I'm focused on Oregon first. If it's good for Oregon, I'll go with it. If it's bad for Oregon, I'm going
Is
to go
Donald
with it.
Trump good for Oregon?
I'm not closely aligned to Donald Trump.
No, I'm not asking
I'm
that.
not.
But
I'm
you
not.
said you want to answer questions about what's good for Oregon. It seems to me it's a legitimate question whether the Trump
No,
administration-
that is a broad banality. Give me a particular thing, and then we can argue the merits of whether
Donald Trump good for the Oregon economy?
If you're invested in the stock market, then it's been a boon to you. So for some of the Oregon economy, for Eastern Oregon, that by and large is not true.
If you're a hazelnut farmer, is Donald Trump good for Oregon?
So far, he probably hasn't had much effect on hazelnuts, one way or the other.
It sounds like you want
A
to.
couple things. The tariffs thing, the tariff thing will complicate hazelnuts and how they get to where they need to go,
Yeah.
circuitously or whatever.
It would be a filbert buster.
Filibuster?
Representative Bueller, letter grade you would assign to the president and why?
Yeah, I would say a C, Nigel. And when Trump is right, I'll agree with him. When he's wrong, I'll disagree with him.
Where has he been right so far?
So I think he's been right with regards to the federal tax changes. I think he's been right with regards to dismantling some of the administrative state through regulation reform. And I think he's been right about calling into question some of the international agreements that we've been taking advantage of in the past.
Where's he been wrong?
I think he's been wrong with proposing to cut Medicaid so severely. I think he's been wrong in his lack of moral certainty in his response to events like in Charlottesville. And I think he's overall been wrong in his divisive tone, which has been damaging for the country in split divisions that are already a problem.
Okay, I ask you this question with a lot of trepidation, but you criticize him for wanting to cut Medicaid heavily or deeply, but you voted against House Bill 2391. So help us with that.
Against Measure 101, yeah. The Measure 101 unfortunately did not provide a sustainable solution to our Medicaid funding problem in the state of Oregon. It was an effort by the governor and unfortunately state Democratic leadership to push this problem past the next election cycle, which they've done all too often in leading the state of Oregon, and not come up with a problem that's going to solve a big funding gap, which we're going to see encountered again in 2019, Nigel, because it all expires. So we had this
so
big.
You weren't opposed to funding Medicaid. You were opposed to the temporary nature of the fund.
Right. In fact, we had a proposal, an alternative proposal that would have set up the framework for a more sustainable funding mechanism for the Medicaid expansion population than what 101 did, and it was a very damaging, divisive approach that then went to ballot measure, and we're going to be right back into the same situation in 2019, but have an even bigger hole to fill because the federal step down of the matching funds decreases. It's the same old story in Oregon. We don't fix the problems; we just push them past the next election cycle, and that's where we need leadership from a governor to really take responsibility to fix these problems. And these problems have continued to be avoided and ignored and made worse by Governor Brown's time in office.
Greg, you want to follow up?
Can I step back like 2 steps to
Sure.
what has Trump done for Oregon?
Yep.
His influence has changed the way FERC approaches things. We have this incredible project at Jordan Cove and Coos Bay. It's a $10 billion liquefied natural gas exporting opportunity, which FERC, through the Obama administration, has stonewalled. Now those permits are starting to come through. Southern Oregon is just suffering dramatically. My eyes were just blown open by traveling down there and hearing people talk about unemployment and living below the poverty line. We have a higher average below the poverty line in Southern Oregon than the rest of the nation. So if we can bring, and he has influenced FERC, the people he appoints, to take a closer look about what brings economic benefit. And that project there is fabulous, and it's clean. And even a coal protester says he likes it because it sends clean energy to Asia, and now that coal they're burning doesn't bring smog and soot to us. So it's just a win-win,
Okay.
and that's why I would point to that.
Okay. Bruce, what letter grade are you giving President Trump and why?
I think I'd give him an A myself. I'm a supporter of President Trump, and the things that I think that we need to do is bring business back to the state, bring business back to the United States, and the dismantling of some of that regulation that is going to impact our to be able to get back to our natural resource-based businesses here in Oregon, and then the tax cut that he just recently gave to businesses. Unfortunately, Oregon decided to disconnect from the code, but we need to lower taxes on businesses, and so economically, that's what I'm looking at is what is he doing economically that's going to help us over the long term, and that's why I've given that grade. So.
Bruce, your campaign literature, you say here 1 out of 6 jobs in Oregon are government
Yes, correct.
employees. And then you say, you refer to something that I'm just not familiar with, and I apologize in ignorance. ORS 240.185 says state employment can only be 1.5% of the Oregon population.
Correct.
Where that?
That's at the end of the budget. When you get to the end of the governor's budget, it states that, and it actually gives a number.
So the number of public employees, state public employees, can be no more than 1.5%.
Yeah, it has some, there's some exemptions there. And in 2011, Governor Kitzhaber removed the whole entire college system from that number. 1/3 of the employees were taken out of there. And so one of the suggestions from the Ways and Means Committee to this governor was to drop that number from 1.5 to 1. And
Didn't
I
have-
believe, well, I looked it up, it looked like they had changed it to 1%. What I had just said there, I believe they had done that. But when you look at, if you look at the numbers, on my website, I've actually got pictures of those graphs that the employment department has, where they moved in 2011, they left, after they did the change with the state, they left them in the employment numbers for the state. And in 2015 and 16, they moved those 18,000 jobs from the state side down to the local government. And they just, those are higher paying jobs. They lowered the average wage at the state level, and and when they moved them, it raised the average wage at the local level. But
Gotcha.
it's just kind of like hiding the pea,
Gotcha.
you know. So whether we have already exceeded that cap, I don't know. I think that's gonna, the next budget, they're gonna look at that, and I think they're gonna say, you know what? That allowed the state to continue to hire even past that number.
So I want to switch to transportation for a second here. As part of the transportation package that passed the legislature last year, there's a proposal to potentially toll I-5 and I-205. The bridges, essentially, the bridges down to where 205 and I-5 come together in Wilsonville. You favor tolling?
No, I
Why?
don't.
Why?
Why not?
Yeah.
I think that I think in the Oregon Department of Transportation, there's enough money to do what we need to do for doing a lot better job, and I think it's just a matter of getting in there, looking at how we can become more efficient within that agency. I think there's some money there that we can use for actually doing what we need to do.
Representative Bueller?
Yeah, Nigel, I voted against the transportation package, not because of any specific financing issue, but I didn't think it did enough to fix the congestion problems in the Portland metro area. I didn't think there was an adequate plan to deal with it, and also a plan that had dedicated funding, or a funding mechanism that I thought could pass the voters. I have great skepticism that the tolling plan that's being talked about right now, tolling to just change behavior, to change drivers' behavior, is not going to be successful at the ballot. I'm not.
It's been pretty successful in London and Singapore and Copenhagen. It's worked around the world. Why wouldn't it work here?
Well, worked. I think it can change behavior. I don't think it can work in getting past the voters. I think there would be great opposition to paying for services right now that are essentially free without adding capacity. I think you could make the argument to toll to add new capacity, but toll something that people are now using for free, I think is a very tough political argument to make.
What is the alternative to decreasing congestion?
I think is adding lane capacity through tolling on those new lanes, and importantly, make those lanes anticipate the transportation technology of the future. So initially make them high occupancy lanes, express lanes for buses, but when you construct those lanes, make sure that they have the built-in sensors that can accommodate autonomous vehicles in the future. If we're going to make this big investment in capacity, make it smart, make it anticipating future transportation developments, and I think that's the way we build our way out of this situation.
Okay. Jeff, tolling? No tolling.
No, I'm totally against it. And I'm totally against the idea of imposing taxes on people to change their driving behavior.
Why?
Their driving behavior is their own personal choice. I have just a philosophical difference that you ought to be imposing something if they want to be in traffic. Maybe they have to drive to work. I just heard that every day there's 50,000 people that drive from Vancouver to Portland. That may not be an accurate number, I don't know, but there's a lot. People have to drive to work, and I have no dog in that fight as far as for trying to change their behavior. If they need to drive to work, then I would want to encourage that and expedite that and help that, not try to change that behavior.
How about you, Greg?
I wouldn't toll because it would drive a lot of folks to the already crowded arterial roads and back them up like you read about, and I don't want that to happen. We need to have smooth flow of commerce, and that means more lanes, as Newt said, and building more roads. Maybe look at the agricultural reserve a little bit, try to work with farmers to get new roads built, the West Side Bypass, et cetera. Bob Terry, hopefully be the chair, would be a big proponent of that. I look at small business and I look at the small margins they work with. Let's say you want to deliver, get the Willamette wheat delivered to all the newsstands out there by a certain time. The impact of traffic is having is really hurting that. I like to talk about the florist that has to make 8 deliveries in an afternoon and can only make 3, loses 5 deliveries because of traffic. So we do have to enable commerce to get to family wage jobs. The whole cycle has to be improved in the infrastructure. So let's get these lanes built.
So a lot of states that are blue states, historically, like Maryland, one of the most liberal states in the country, has had a series of Republican governors. Massachusetts, one of the most liberal states in the country, has had a series of Republican governors. Your party has been shut out of Salem since Vicatia held the governor's chair. Shut out of the governor's chair, I should say. So why is that, and what could Republicans do to win this race? Start with you, Greg.
Sure. There's a little bit of a frustration and a giving up amongst Republican voters because it has been we've been so unsuccessful over the years. I like to say out in rural Oregon, let's get the PCPs out there, each of them, to go out and get 4 more Republican ballots into the mail. I like to say this to you. I think far too often in rural Oregon, we leave the ballot on the kitchen table because we just don't think there's any hope. We know there's no chance. This year is incredible hope for that. And you get the right candidate running against Kate Brown, and we're going to bring out a lot of Republican voters that haven't voted before out of, it was futile to them to vote. And there are a lot of other issues that are on the ballot that are going to help bring that vote out. So I think that's why we haven't had success in the past. And I think it's time for a conservative candidate to run against Kate Brown. And I think there are a lot of folks in the middle and some on the left that are ready for that.
Jeff, why are Republicans on such a long losing streak?
It all revolves around Multnomah County. The typical Republican is down at least 150,000 votes in Multnomah County alone. Donald Trump was down 224,000 in Multnomah County alone. The rest of the state can't pack that much water. My campaign is geared to flipping 100,000 votes in Multnomah County to do something that they were not going to do 18 months ago. And I have selected issues that I feel are competitive in Multnomah County. My whole campaign is to be competitive in Multnomah County.
Representative?
Because they haven't nominated someone like me, someone who has a diversity of experience, being a physician, having deep ties to the community, starting and running businesses of small and both moderate size, and having real lawmaking experience where I've shown independent leadership. And that independent leadership is something that is just not for this election. This is who I am. I've made a career of that over the long time. If you remember, Nigel, I started my career helping Ross Perot run for in his presidential bid, and during my time in the legislature, I've shown my independent streak. When my party is right, I'll agree with the party. When it's wrong, I'll break from my party on important issues. And
But give us an example of where you've broken from your party on an important issue.
I can give you several from each session. I was one of the few people who voted against conversion therapy. I was one of the few Republicans in the next session that voted for the coal to clean bill. I was the first Republican to call for Cruz to resign this summer. In this last legislative session, I was one of only 3 Republicans who voted to close the boyfriend loophole. So, I put people before party, and I don't think we've nominated someone who has that kind of diversity of experience, independence, and proven leadership in the public sector.
So what does your polling suggest to you that those non-affiliated or independent voters care about? What's the issue on which they are up for grabs?
I think the issues that are important to them are the fiscal condition of the state, increasingly housing and homelessness, and health care. Those are the issues.
What did your polling show you about your name recognition?
It's good. It's healthy. We keep our polling private, but it's listen. I wouldn't do this if I didn't see.
Do more than half the people in the state know your name?
No.
Keep it private, bro.
They will, though, guaranteed.
Okay.
That's not that hard.
Here comes the TV, huh?
you buy name recognition at their local TV station. Yeah.
Bruce, how come Republicans have been losing?
Well, I have a different take on this. I believe Oregon is a lot more conservative than what our current legislature shows us, because I believe that we lost ground in 1990, 2000, 2010 when they redrew the district lines. And I believe that Oregon is, I mean, just looking at Dennis Richardson's race versus Bud Pierce's race, 2 years ago, Dennis Richardson, a conservative, gets elected, Bud Pierce, moderate, does not get elected. So I think that to win in Oregon, we need to have a conservative candidate that's going to energize the base, get folks in Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon and the Willamette Valley that are interested in the conservative agenda to turn out to vote. And I think if you run somebody that does not share those values, they're not going to turn out to vote. So, and you can compare those two races last time. Dennis Richardson got 28% of Multnomah County and was still able to win statewide because the voter turnout was there for him. And that's what I believe. I believe that a conservative can win in Oregon. I think the reason we have not won over the last 36 years is because we've moved to the middle, quite frankly.
You had something you wanted to ask?
Nope.
Aaron?
We are out of time.
Okay. We're out of time except for
One
question that I have continually failed to ask properly.
Can we create time so they can each
Yeah,
ask
yeah,
each
let's
other?
do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So each of you can ask one question of one of your opponents.
Got to be a question that they can answer, not a statement. So,
Greg, why don't we start with you?
Wow. I guess because we're so, not so different, a little bit different, I would ask Dr. Bueller. What would I ask him? How do you feel about...
My favorite beer?
Yeah, what's your favorite craft brew? IP43, how about that? How about that for a hot potato?
could you, just because we're filming this and not all our voters will know that IP43 is
Yeah.
a gun bill, could you explain it just for the benefit of the
Well,
TV audience?
yeah, it's a bill that was drawn up after the Parkland
Yep,
massacre.
yep,
Nasty,
yep,
heart-wrenching, awful.
yep. And it would be
And it takes away gun ownership of, and Bruce probably knows this better than I, semi-automatic weapons and certain.
Including handguns.
Including handguns, yeah. And it gives this authorities to,
It
authority to come to your house.
requires registration of weapons that have certain characteristics.
So it's IP43, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't, so I
Your question is,
how would you vote on that?
Yeah, well, it's not a bill, but it's a ballot
Yeah, it's
measure,
a
so
ballot,
that has.
but I mean, how would you?
Trying to measure it, it's a petition.
It's a
Right.
petition,
Would you
and
sign
we
the
don't have the
petition? Would
funds.
you sign the petition?
I'm against IP43. I think it goes too far. I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment, but I also think there's strong, and there should be strong emotions on both sides of this, and it goes too far. But I'm not against common sense solution to
what
gun
part of
violence.
IP43 are you most troubled by?
So I think there's constitutional problems in going and confiscating guns from people who already own these types of assault rifles and semi-automatic rifles.
Are you a gun owner?
Yeah.
What kind of gun do you
I have a Springfield Armory 9mm and for self-protection, and I have a 22 that I use to shoot varmints in the spring.
You member of the NRA?
So, no.
All right, Jeff, would you like to ask any of your opponents a question?
No, well, yeah. What kind of craft beer you like?
Well, being from Bend, I have to,
You have to go with the
Boneyard
Deschutes.
RP.
Yeah,
RP.
Deschutes.
Okay. Representative, would you like to ask any of your opponents a question?
Yeah, I would ask Jeff, since he's new to this process, what have you learned so far that has surprised you in running for elected office?
Well, I think one of the most difficult challenges for me is there's 150 state agencies. Everything is fair game as far as for nuts and bolts about those things. So just educating myself on the nuts and bolts of how all of this stuff works is there's a huge learning curve, and I feel like I've been diligent in learning a lot of stuff, but there's always areas that you're sitting there going, golly, I'm not educated enough yet to give a valid opinion on, and in those areas, I just have to be honest about that and just say, haven't thought about it yet, have got to research it. I am very good at researching. I know how to look at the original documents, go find out, things that are not on Facebook, but are actual, the documents that are actually, so I feel like that was an eye opener, just the minutia you can dig into.
It's like healthcare, who knew it was so complicated? Bruce, would you like to ask anybody questions?
Yeah, Dr. Bueller, all across the state, a lot of our forums you haven't attended, and I'm just kind of curious why, we show up and we only have a number of us there, but you haven't been at those, and a lot of our party affiliates say, why not? So
Yeah.
I'm just curious why you haven't been there.
Yeah, well, I reject the underlying premise of your question. By the end of the month, I'll have been at 50, either myself or my campaign manager have been at 50 of these forums, and there's now more forums than I've ever seen before, certainly a lot more than when I ran for Secretary of State, and I think it's because of the divisions within the Republican Party. I certainly try to get to many forums as possible, but I'm talking to all kinds of voters. I'm not running to be the chair of the Oregon Republican Party. I'm running to be the next governor of Oregon for all Oregonians, no matter if they're registered as Republicans, Democrats, or independents.
All right, Nigel.
Go ahead, Nick.
I'm going to take the fun question.
Yeah, you can take the phone.
Oh boy, fun me. So at the end of these interviews, try to ask a fun question to help the readers get to know you a little better. And the question this year is, what's the most embarrassing thing that Facebook knows about you? Mr. Cuff, we'll start with you.
Facebook knows about me?
Or that can be found on Facebook.
Oh,
Do you have a Facebook page?
yeah, I do, but
I can tell you, I can look it up.
I don't know. I don't get embarrassed real easy. So I mean, I'm just a normal guy that whatever's out there is out there. I mean, I don't.
No pictures of you dressed as a chicken?
No,
or,
I don't think. No,
No?
I can't.
Wearing an
think of
SEIU t-shirt?
A pink hat?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's pictures out there. The most embarrassing, I can't really even answer that. I don't know what it would be.
Representative?
Yeah, I have two very spoiled dogs, and they've grown very accustomed to riding on my stand-up paddleboard in the summer. So there's some embarrassing pictures of my
What-
dogs on the paddleboard.
What
So,
kind of dogs you got and what are their names?
Winston, who's a Labradoodle, and then Lily, who's a mutt. So,
Smith.
I don't think that they're on Facebook, or at least they weren't recently. But they came from my kids, and I'm not going to say exactly what they were, because otherwise you'll go look for it. But they were from my kids, and it was very embarrassing to me.
One that I think might show up, it's not so embarrassing, it's fun. Last night in Klamath, we had a big confab that lasted way long, like to 10 o'clock last night in Klamath Falls, so it was a lot of fun though. One of the organizers came up to me, can I take a picture with you? And she took a picture, and she had this thing where it puts pink ears on you. And
Oh yeah,
sunglasses
she
on
got
you.
me with that too, but
And
I don't know if
it's
that's
gonna show
posted.
up.
The filters.
It's going to show up, and I don't think it doesn't embarrass me. I just laugh my tail off when I see it. So that's about the only thing.
There you go. Well, thank you very much to all of you.
May I make one quick statement? Because I don't want to leave my brother Bruce hanging down there. Last year I came back to the Lord, and it's really, it's really touched me, given me strength, and I wake up every morning with so much love in my heart, and so we got to take care of all people. And so, Bruce, I'm not going to leave you hanging, brother.
All right.
Thank you all for coming in.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. Good luck, Joe. Good to see you, Bruce.
Yep.
Good to see you.
Yep.